Welcome back to the Rigby Campfire Podcast. I'm Marc Newton, the Managing Director for Rigby Gunmakers. We are here in the tent at Dallas Safari Club 2024. We've got a very dear friend and legend of the Rigby journey, Kent Porter, with me. He's an unsung hero of the return of the company, shall we say, since we came back from America in 2013. Thank you very much for joining us, Kent.
Thank you for having me.
Kent, why don't you start by sharing with us all how you came into the Rigby Story?
I came into the Rigby Story because I had worked with another gentleman, John Rigby, on a previous turnaround opportunity, or making a company come back to its life. And he had the opportunity to purchase Rigby. And we got together and talked about the strategy of Rigby and where it should go and how it should go. And we came to an agreement, and we ended up working together very closely on this project it was a very short turnaround, about 11 months. And, the rest is sort of history with your expert guidance.
Well, I think it's such an important chapter, actually, in the Rigby story. So we go back nearly 250 years, which you know as much as I do about, but, and there's been many twists and turns on the Rigby journey. Rigby went to America in 1997, was in California until, I think, 2010. And, that 11 months that you talk about, without that, frankly, I'm not sure that the company would still be here and still going and be the success story that it is.
Well, that's very kind of you. It was very important for me when I started working with the company. All of the journals were in Dallas in an office, and all of we call it ephemera, all of the old royal warrants and some historical signage and photos, and I really wanted to turn that space into somewhat of a museum. So I unwrapped it all, I hung it all up and had museum lighting on all the art, and then that was my office. And that really gave me a sense of a history of the company and an obligation to sort of try to move it forward in the best way that conveyed the history of the company, not my desires for whatever it would be.
People are very aware we've been telling the story about how Rigby came back to London. I think what I'd be really interested to share with everybody is how Rigby moved from California to Dallas, Texas before that eventual move to London.
Okay, so, there was a group of guys or a gentleman in California who was building Rigby guns, and there came an opportunity for the previous owners, the Mauser Group, to purchase the assets of the company. And so one of the things that we really wanted to do was to sort of deal with the trademark issues and deal with the people who are trying to create a Rigby's out of nothing. And then also, there was a lot of, I use this term that, there's a few people along the way sort of picked the bones of the Rigby carcass. And it was, there'll be a sign here or a sign there. And so I want to collect all of those things back together, sort of put it back together. And then once we had that in Texas, and the previous owners had done all the trademark work, then we've got a company that we can then start building. The idea all along was to build London best guns, to sort of move the company back into a smaller part of its former glory. And so that process happened before I arrived for the most part. But then when I received sort of the stewardship of it myself, I wanted to make sure that we were, dealing with Paul and yourself and trying to plan out the right kinds of guns, and then also collect back some of the old things that people had sort of forgotten that they had acquired or owned that really weren't supposed to be owned outside of the company. They were still assets of the company. So we'd collect as much as I could, put it back together. And then, we went on to starting to build guns and have clients and repeat customers and all that stuff.
Absolutely. And interesting that rebuilding the Rigby collection, that's something that continues to this very day. And we've been able to continue your hard work by adding different things, whether it might turn up in auction and you might think, well, how did it get there? Or someone reaches out to us, and we've been really very fortunate to be able to, put a lot of that back together. And Because that is, I suppose, the physical embodiment of what Rigby's is as a brand. Without the archives and the stuff, the historical guns and things, it's just an idea.
You're right. There are one popped up recently that you're aware of. It's a fantastic part of the history of Rigby, and will live with the company going forward.
Yeah. People quite often ask me, how did Rigby come into the hands of the Blaser Group? So as people at home will know, we're owned by the same people who own Blaser, Mauser, big gun making group in Germany, and that sort of transition from California, and it's keep mentioning it's sort of a piece of history that's sort of been lost there. How did it move from California to Texas?
John purchased the company, and so then he was looking for someone who could help him run the company. And they sort of tried to find their way for a year or two. And, me being a safari person and a gun person and having worked with John previously, I developed a plan to sort of how we might try to rebuild the brand from really nothing. We had, there was one or two guns that had sold in the previous 2 years. And so how do we make this company that had such a storied and beloved past become, on the path to what it could be. And so one of the things as you know, because you and I worked very closely together, was for one of the Dallas shows, the Safari Club shows, was to build some rifles and have them in the white at the show that people could purchase. And the first year, I think we built 5, and we sold them all within a day or two of the show opening, and we were taking orders.
No, absolutely. I can remember the day we met each other, and I was at the time working for Paul Roberts. Paul Roberts, Jay Robertson's son, was working as an outworker, a contractor for producing those guns. I think that was such a smart move from John and Jeff, who own the company here, to re-partner with Paul and to bring that pedigree, I suppose, back to the gun making process. And I remember flying over to talk to them about the Rigby journey and what they were doing with it, and you were brought into the office to talk about your ideas. And I remember, if I'm really honest, I remember being quite intimidated actually, because you put forward such a brilliant case. I remember just thinking, man, this guy's really got his stuff together, and your vision for it. I don't think I actually ever shared that with you.
No, you haven't. It was really an interesting process for me as well, because I didn't know I had an idea of what I wanted to do. But I was talking to another gentleman last night, and when we were building the first rifles, I remember being at Paul Roberts and having a rifle in the white and holding it and talking with Marc Remnant and saying, I want you to take wood off, more wood, because I wanted it to be like those, really elegant 20s Rigby rifles. And I sort of felt like that was the product at the time that people were really after. Was this London best rifles with slim forends that felt good in the hands, that were well balanced, but there were also beautiful works of art that they could take into the field and use as an heirloom idol.
So interesting you mentioned that about shaving the stocks down and getting to that pre-war feel. I'm not going to mention his name. There's a gun maker, a very renowned stock maker at this show right now, just as a quick side story. And I remember the very first year we came back from, based in London, and the first couple of guns we did, they were, again, in the white. We were just getting the company sort of going back in London. And I'd come out from the school of Paul Roberts, who tended to build his stocks a little bit heavier. And that was a result of his safari hunting and seeing stocks break. And I remember sort of very proudly turning up with this gun. And this gentleman, again, I'm not going to mention his name, came along, and he sort of made a very disparaging remark about it. And I think he called it a club. And it really resonated with me so much that I thought about it every single day for the next year. And I went straight back to London after the show, and I said, we need to get this. We need to get a pre-war gun out of storage, and we need to get back to that core DNA. And in fact, the next year we had a rack of guns with that stock shape. And this gentleman came past, and I pulled him over, and I said, I just want to thank you for this remark you made last year. And he was really embarrassed that I remembered it. I said, no, really. I said, this stock shape is really down to that one comment. And that stock shape has stayed with us now for the last decade. And I think it's been one of the reasons why we've sold so many guns.
Yeah, and it's, you look back and you look at the records, and you have some records that people sort of forgot about. I'm going to bring up a topic because I know this is something that, is dear to your heart. We had one rifle that was what we call, it was a lightweight. It was like just a shade over 9 pounds. And it was a beautiful and lovely thing that we was sort of made either on spec, or it was just, it was I'm not going to say an oddity, but it was a rifle that when you look back in the archives of the guns going to Africa for, general governmental use, you see all these lightweight rifles. And you guys built one. And it was really one of the most beautiful handling and lovely rifles that was made at that time. It was just one.
It was just one. And it's so interesting. In 10 years, we built over 2,000 Rigbys. And whilst I can't remember all of them, I remember that exact gun. And it's funny how guns, you build them and they go out into the world, and then you encounter them years later. And that gun was bought by Brian Watto,
right,
who is actually here at the show. He won't mind me mentioning him at all. And I found myself in Australia earlier this year for a memorial hunt for the late David Auger, who's a fantastic friend of the company, did a brilliant job for us in Australia, and tragically passed away last year. And I was on a hunt with Watto with that rifle.
Fantastic.
And I remember being around the campfire and telling them the story about how you'd come up with it. And it's amazing, actually. I think that speaks volumes of just Rigby as a brand, how there's all these like micro stories and how it all weaves together, the sort of rich tapestry that Rigby's is as a company.
One of the things that I ended up doing, of course you were in that office many times, but I had all of the ledgers and behind me. And originally they were wrapped in this heavy duty paper that was designed to protect them. But they were just, it was just sort of a blank slate. And so then I took them all out, started looking at the ledgers, and I would sit in my office, look at the ledgers and find, guns for, now King Charles, the Queen Mother, and, Queen Elizabeth, and Winston Churchill with the famous pistols that he purchased. You go through and you see all of this history, and it sort of forced you to say, okay, well, we have to honor all that history and how we go forward. And then, of course, all that ended up in your capable hands, and as I say, the rest is history.
Well, it's exactly why I wanted to sit down with you today, because those 11 months that you again mentioned earlier, they are absolutely essential with the rebirth of Rigby's. I've been at this show now for a day and a half, and it's the same every year. We're so fortunate to be so beloved by customers, to Rigby fans from around the world who turn up here, and they all take the time to come by the booth, to shake our hands, say thank you so very much for what a great job you've done bringing the company back. But really, without your input, without those 11 months, that time we had together, we just wouldn't be here now. I mean, there would be no company.
Well, we had a lot of fun, a few adventures, and it was a great time. And it's really amazing to see where you've taken the company, because as we sit in here, I don't know how big this booth is, but it's a massive booth, and you guys are just really producing, I think, the best rifles in the world at this time. And it shows, because everyone loves Rigby. It's a more approachable brand to me than other brands. Part of that's the history of the books, the Corbett books, and all of that most everyone who's a hunting person has read. And so everyone has a little bit of a connection to Rigby, even if they don't own a Rigby.
No, absolutely. I say this all the time, that I'm very blessed to actually be a shareholder of Rigby's at the company, but frankly, the brand belongs to everybody. It's like, I think so many of us, we go and hunt, we go to Africa especially because of those old black and white photos, the Jim Corbett stories from India, J.A. Hunter, W.D.M. Bell. This is why we're going to Africa, to kind of touch the past in some way. And on a wider scale, Rigby does. It belongs to everyone. It's our shared heritage as hunters.
Absolutely. And there's been a series of stewards who've had the privilege of managing the brand. Mine was probably the shortest in the entire group, but you have a chance to sort of have a touch history, live with history, pass it on to the next person, and hope that it continues to thrive.
Absolutely. And really, actually, I think you've become great friends, and you're one of the most humble people that I know. And it's, you keep talking about these 11 months, and in a very humble way, but they were so important. And something that I've tried to sort of emulate from yourself and just sort of passing that forwards is that we are, it's very easy to fall in love with the fact that I'm Mr. Rigby at the show, but frankly, I'm but a custodian, as you were a custodian, as Paul Roberts was a custodian. And I think as long as and I set out from like day one, I just thought to myself, whatever I do with this company under my tenure, I must pass it forward in a better condition in which I inherited it. And that's no reflection of yourself, because you passed it forward to me in a better way. I mean, you really had
it was easy for me to pass it forward better because I didn't start with anything.
Yeah, it sort of, you really started from rock bottom after what happened in California. And again, the California piece is so interesting that we, in the early days, I can remember, there was a kind of legal issues floating around. In the first 18 months, people would phone me up at the office saying, are you the Dallas Rigbys or the London Rigbys or the Californian Rigbys? Right. And sorry, my very bad attempt at an American accent there, but it's that's really gone away now. And you were at our VIP client event last night and made a little speech, and I really want to set the record straight, and that's why we invited you on the podcast today, to really make sure that people know just how important your contribution to the journey was, because it didn't just go from California and then magically spring up back in London. There was this transition period that without it, we wouldn't have this.
Well, I mean, I appreciate everything you're saying, and it makes me a little bit uncomfortable, but it is, I had a chance to try to do the right thing, and I wanted to do the right thing for Rigby because I was a fan of Rigby, because my brother had one of the Corbett books and I read it when I was a kid. And so, of course, I had that connection, even though there wasn't really a connection to our rifle. It's just a part of the history, and you want to do the right thing by the brand and by the history. And, my part was the smallest part in the long history of the 250 years. But, I'm happy that it has turned out so well, so fantastic. The rifles are so amazing, and everything you're doing with the art and the other parts of the brand that also allows people to touch and hold. And if they can't afford a top line rifle, they're buying all kinds of other things that they can then be a part of Rigby.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, as we wrap up here, just like from myself, the guys in Germany, I think every Rigby fan around the world, I just want to say a massive, massive thank you to you, Ken. And you're very hard on yourself, and I know it makes you feel uncomfortable to receive that praise, but I really mean it, mate.
It means the world for me. It's the world to me to have you express that to me.
No, thank you very much, Ken.
Cheers.
All right, man. We're going to close up there, and we look forward to seeing you again soon.